Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of r/slash entitled people. In today's episode, Karen accused me of stealing my own car, tricked a dumb cop into arresting me. Now my car is a wreck because he gave her the keys. Entitled roommate stays up all night long, then has the audacity to complain. I'm not Uber. Before we get started, make sure to subscribe so you will never miss a video. So let's get started. Karen accused me of stealing my own car, tricked a dumb cop into arresting me. Now my car is a wreck because he gave her the keys. I really don't care who believes this, but here's my story. I live in one of those middle-of-nowhere desert towns where almost everyone knows almost everyone and it's hot as hell, but dirt cheap to buy a home or land in. And it's not uncommon for old cars to last out here as they almost never rust and people keep fixing them. After high school, I worked at a local job to get my own place. I ended up buying a small plot of land with a trailer on it off of a local guy that decided he was going to move to Texas. And the guy also sold me his old Ford Escort prior to that. It was an okay first car. Got me around well enough. Still have it too. 10 years have gone by since then. And for a while, I spent a lot of my time tinkering with an old 87 Monte Carlo that I bought super cheap as it was without an engine or transmission. I loved that car as an older cousin of mine had one when I was a kid, and I always wanted one of my own. I spent 2 years fixing up the one I got with help from some friends and finished it in 2019. Since the engine was missing, I dropped in a junkyard Chevy 305 V8 that was connected to a rebuilt 4-speed automatic transmission with low miles from a totaled car. Then I painted it myself inside a friend's garage with a Harbor Freight sprayer and some GM black single-stage gloss paint and buffed it to a shine. And I finished it up with some gold Monte Carlo decals and some classic moon rims I bought from the local junkyard and polished up. I also partially redid the interior by replacing the seats and put in a custom steering wheel. I'm not really a mechanic, but my friends all helped me. And online how-to videos on my smartphone really helped as well. The car was fun to drive and looked good. And I kept it in good order. That is until this mess went down. Now, I didn't really trust some of the local law enforcement out here before, and this gave me even more reason not to. A lot of the cops around here are barely qualified for the job. They are practically hired with a handshake and just told to play Doom for training. Granted, though, many of them are really nice. The sheriff is even kinda a friend of mine. But he's really one of the only competent ones there. Most of the rest really don't do their jobs very well, especially whenever a new one gets hired on. Like a guy that went out of his way to move to my town just to get to be a cop. In this case, he was the nephew of the sheriff. He even brought his own Crown Vic with a loudspeaker to drive around town in. Let's call this guy NC for nephew cop since he was the sheriff's nephew. NC and I didn't know each other personally yet, but I was aware of him. He was dumb as a rock and high on his own ego. He was like Barney Fife and John Cena had an illegitimate son together because he was a tall, strong-looking man that was always giving people creepy looks and patrolled on foot up and down Main Street with a clipboard in hand and a big grin on his face. He also liked to publicly flex his muscles in front of people. One Saturday morning, I took my Monte Carlo out to meet a friend, but they ended up bailing because of a last-minute issue with their girlfriend. I thought, meh, no problem. I'll just get some fast food and go home. I went to the local burger place and got a meal to go. And as I was walking out, there was a lady outside looking over my car. She was bent over in a very short skirt. And not gonna lie, I enjoyed the view. People would stop here and there to ask me about my car and where I got it. I usually don't mind talking so long as they are polite, though this woman ended up anything but. She was curvy and good-looking while wearing a black miniskirt. I'm guessing early to mid-30s or so. Not really sure. I asked her if she liked my car. She stood up, took one look at me, and snickered. I asked her what was so funny. To get an idea of what I looked like at the time, I was a skinny guy with a scraggly beard and was wearing a faded ACDC shirt with the sleeves ripped off, along with worn-out cut-off denim shorts and flip-flops. I guess she figured I was poor or something. So she was probably judging my appearance. She looked me up and down in a very obvious way, and then said, "There's no way this is your car. You couldn't possibly afford something this nice." Now I have a tendency to get sarcastic or snide when people make assumptions about me. So I said back, "Oh really, lady? The title is in my name. And these keys right here in my hand say I'm the owner too. The Karen just glared at me as I put the keys in the lock and began to open the door. I looked behind her and noticed an beige 90s Volvo with a missing headlight and had out-of-state plates on it parked not far from me. I put two and two together and laughed. "Let me guess, lady? That's your car over there." She started to turn beet red. I laughed and said, "Oh, don't be ashamed. Those things aren't lookers, but they'll run forever." I figured this was over, but as I was opening my car door, I suddenly felt her nails digging into my shoulder. She was screeching so loud my ears were hurting. And before I could turn around, she kicked me between my legs from behind with a high-heeled shoe so hard I collapsed in agony. And true to my luck, NC drove right up because he'd heard her screeching from down the street during his noon patrol. As soon as NC was out of his car, the Karen ran to him crying and saying that I was a carjacker that was attempting to take her new car. I wasn't looking at either of them as I was on the ground wincing in a fetal position from the pain. The next thing I heard was NC yelling, "Put your hands behind your back." And then I was being pinned down by his knee on my spine and forcibly cuffed. I tried telling NC that I knew his uncle and can prove I am the real owner of the car. But he called me white trash and told me to shut up. Then he picked my keys up off the ground and actually handed them to the Karen. Then he seemed to do a hero pose while she gave me a shit-eating grin. No matter what I said, NC wasn't listening to me because he fully believed her. And then I had to see Karen start up my car and drive off with it. My heart sank as I watched it sail down the road with her flipping me off. Then NC drugged me back to the sheriff's office. I'd hoped his uncle was in, but just my bad luck, he was out to lunch. So NC put me in the cell and told me to keep quiet. I was pissed, but I knew I wasn't going to make my situation any better, so I just waited. And during that time, NC kept giving me looks of contempt. At one time, he walked across the cell with a nightstick, grazing it against each bar like he was trying to intimidate me. At least an hour went by, and the sheriff finally came in through the door nursing a big gulp, but froze the second he saw me. "Opie, what are you doing here?" he asked. I was about to speak when NC jumped in and said, "I caught this lowlife creep trying to steal a lady's car, so I hauled him in." That's when I finally got my chance to speak and said, "Yeah, only it was my car. The one I spent so long fixing up." NC just rolled his eyes and said not to listen to me. But the sheriff silenced him and asked my full story. As I tried to tell it, NC was making dismissive looks and kept repeatedly interrupting until the sheriff told him to sit down and shut up. Then when I was finally able to say everything that happened, he was furious. The sheriff laid into NC, who was cowering in a chair like a little boy and saying that it indeed was my car, and he stupidly gave my keys to a thief that had assaulted me. NC started frantically apologizing and trying to say he was just trying to help. But the sheriff called him an idiot that just wanted to play hero by saving a damsel in distress. And now the whole department would be in hot water for his unlawful arrest and physical assault against me. Then he finally let me out of the cell. I got some ice for my crotch and got taken home. The sheriff and NC went back to the burger restaurant, but the Karen's car was no longer there. They got the CCTV footage from the camera the restaurant had looking outside. It caught everything minus the audio. The Karen came back riding piggyback with a guy on a motorcycle over a half hour from the time she left with my car. She blew him a kiss and then drove off in her Volvo. The sheriff scrambled everyone, even NC, to try and chase her down. But they couldn't find her as she'd already driven out of the county lines. Some phone calls were made to other departments to look for her, and I had to sit at home with an ice pack on my crotch all evening waiting for news on what happened. A couple days later, my car was found just a few miles out of town. The Karen had broken all of the windows with what I'm assuming was the tire iron and then put the car in neutral and let it coast down a deep rocky hill, which rolled it into the bottom ditch, which smashed the front end and warped the frame. It was completely totaled. I wanted to cry from the sound of metal grinding on rock as the tow truck pulled it back up. NC was there too. And he couldn't even look at me the entire time. My insurance also didn't want to cover the car. So the sheriff's office was made to pay me the value of my Monte Carlo instead, since NC let it happen, which was only about $5,000. Though that was honestly close to what I had into it, since I did almost all the work by hand with the help of friends. NC also paid me another $2,000 for my trouble and said it was most of his savings. The Karen was caught at a motel estate over some time later and arrested for soliciting prostitution and drug possession. Grand theft auto was just one of many things she was charged with. I got on a video call just to see her in court and testify. She looked like a wreck the whole time because she knew she was screwed. And it wasn't long before she was pronounced guilty. She got 10 years behind bars with no possibility of parole. As for NC, the sheriff all but begged me not to sue him because he was his nephew and he promised his sister he'd look out for the guy. I'm not a sue-happy person, so I let it go provided NC actually takes some sort of course on how to properly do his job. And so the incident was more or less rug-swept and NC was demoted to sitting at a desk all day answering phones, and they would be docking part of his pay until every penny was paid back. He still regulated to desk duty half of the time these days. And he still avoids me anytime I'm near him. Arguably, he's a better cop now though because he mellowed out. As for me, it took some time, but with help I finally located a replacement Monte Carlo project car with a clean title. And it was the same year too. I salvaged as many parts as I could from my old one and used it all in the build. The engine and transmission were still good, and somehow so were most of the base parts. And the sheriff personally came by to help my friends, and I'd build the new car in his downtime. It took a year, but now I've got a fresh-looking Monte Carlo that looks just like my old one. You'd never know they weren't the same car. I've made sure to have better insurance this time around, and I'll be damned if I ever let a Karen near my car again. I think I have heard this story, but it was from the sheriff's perspective. By chance did that sheriff source parts out of Virginia and pay some guy to get them from a junkyard in the Monte Carlo out of Norfolk in or around 2004 to 2005 and deliver them to NC for you? No, I don't think that's related. This all went down about a year ago. I would have sued the NC. People like him don't deserve to be cop. Why didn't the cop think to ask for registration? I don't think this guy should be a cop if he is going to believe someone based on looks instead of evidence. Apparently, this cop just want to play a hero. Eventually, he got caught. I wouldn't want him to be a cop in my hometown. My grandmother had one. It was 1983 Monte Carlo. It was all white and red seating. Love that car. My friend had one all black, a beauty. I think it was 1978 or 79. I love driving it. Unfortunately, when he passed, the car got sold and I couldn't get it. So sorry for this to happen to you, but it's nice to hear you got another one. Good luck. Entitled roommate stays up all night long, then has the audacity to complain. I'm a college student, so that comes with a roommate. Unfortunately, the dorm rooms are thin-walled, meaning our neighbors can hear even the slightest of noises. My roommate has a new boyfriend who she likes talking to, but she talks to him late at night. Our hall has quiet hours that begin at 10 p.m., meaning the noise has to be kept to a minimum or you might get in trouble for being too loud. Starting with a warning, then moving up to fines, then after this termination of the housing contract. She has gotten a warning from our neighbors a couple of times previously, even had to go and talk to the hall director once already. Yet she got all mad when she now has to pay a fine because she was up at 12:30 p.m. talking to her boyfriend on speaker. For context, she is a loud talker to begin with. Her whisper sounds more like a regular speaking voice, which I have no problem with. I mean, I am the same way. However, not only did she complain to me, she complained to the neighbors that tattled on her. Now she is not in good standing with them either. She told me that she was going to go to the housing directors and file a complaint against our hall director as well as our neighbors because they make her feel that she does not have any freedom in her own room. I do not know how well this is going to go over. She strikes me as a person that, growing up, nothing was ever her fault. People have a right to not want to hear loud conversations while trying to sleep. Oh, do not get me started on the stories she has told me about her family. They are crazy, I swear. Looks like her little entitlement bubble is about to pop. Inwards. You had me at talking on speaker. SMH for people who do that all the time but don't need to. I'm not Uber. I need to rant out of what happened on my way to work before I can set up for a meeting. This morning on my way to work, I stopped at 2 red lights and a zebra crossing. Why does it take so long for the lights to change, and why do people walk very slowly on zebra crossings? At each stop, I had entitled people trying to get into my car. After they failed to open the doors, they come to my driver's door. I put the window down a little for February 1st entitled people, but the third was shouting through the closed window. Every one of these entitled people started the conversation with screaming/shouting that the doors are locked. I replied with, "Of course they are. I don't want any strangers in my car." They replied with basically the same. "I'm a customer. You are my Uber and I'm late for work/doctors/unknown location for second entitled person at zebra crossing." My reply was mainly, "I'm not Uber." We shouted at each other until I was able to drive away. With entitled person 1, I try to keep my cool, but towards the end I was shouting back at them. Then entitled person 2, I was much quicker to shout at them. The third entitled person, our encounter was almost the same as the others, but with more swearing at them, and pointed out how bad their common sense was. Like I'm not pulled up to the pathway, he had to walk out on the road to get to my car. I'm stopped at a red light. That is the only reason I stopped there. I don't have Uber stickers/signs on my car. Your app will tell you the status of your ride. Third entitled person was saying that I don't look like what app told him of his driver and my car not matching what the app says. After writing what happened, helped calm me down and got me thinking that my anger towards this situation was increased because this is the 5th day of being mistaken for Uber. I only gotten my new car from the dealership last Saturday. Since driving it out and about, I'm being mistaken for an Uber. Why do entitled people think every new car is an Uber driver? Just why? Here I'm thinking, these are people trying to carjack me once they're in my car. I had a crazy, drug-addicted neighbor once, who more than one friend told me tried to get into their car after visiting me. She actually found the car door unlocked one time, hopped into the front passenger seat and demanded that my friend give her a ride. Pre-cell phone days, so my friend couldn't even call 911. She was able to get her out of her car eventually, I think by threatening to only drive her to the nearest police station. Keep a Betty Crocker silver cake spray in the car. When they get in, spray your mouth with it like a war boy off Mad Max and shout "Witness me" as you floor it. Way too early to laugh this hard. Thank you. If you made it to the end of the video, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe and share, and we will see you in the next video.